You're going to get to meet a few people. We're going to introduce a new individual, not new to state government and not new to serving the people of Minnesota, but new on the focus around making sure program integrity is utmost importance. But I want to address at the top here two of our fellow Minnesotans, two of our fellow American citizens, two of our fellow Minnesota American citizens who were minding their own business and living their lives were detained by and arrested by ICE. These chaotic operations are doing nothing to make us safer. These chaotic operations are not done in any coordination with law enforcement in the middle of a blizzard. The absolute recklessness of doing some of this and the targeting of a specific community, unconscionable, does nothing to either address immigration. It certainly does nothing to address fraud in programs. It is very specifically aimed and very racially motivated towards a Somali community that matters greatly here. I know there was a hearing yesterday to get some answers on this. The DHS secretary left, no reason, stood up and left that hearing. I have not received a response to my letters asking about explanations on what's happening. I would note that I was in that hearing and I stayed for the 8.5 hours and answered all the questions. I think the expectation would be in a moment like this where American citizens' constitutional rights are being violated and put at risk, that there would be an answer. And also in the midst of this, I think it's really important. I'd like to acknowledge just the basic decency, not a surprise to everybody in here has been, but Senator Jim Abler's willingness to stand up and note that it should be the simplest thing in the world when the President of the United States calls an entire group of people garbage and our state garbage and hellhole, to just disavow that. You can still be very conservative. You can still call yourself a Republican. But I think if you want to call yourself a Minnesotan and you want to call yourself a decent human being, you follow Jim Abler's role here. He and I have battled on many issues. We disagree on a lot of policy issues. But I know over the years that he stands up for what's right. So I thank him, and I think for fellow Minnesotans to know in this moment, there's going to be a temptation as this happens and this recklessness happens. I would caution people, express your First Amendment rights, but it's clear the President wants a spectacle. It's clear they want to arrest more people. They have a made-up quota number by Stephen Miller, an unelected official, who's telling them just to arrest as many people possible so we can say it. They're not targeted on violent criminals. They're not targeted, obviously. They took American citizens. They deported a U.S. combat veteran who served this nation in uniform and deported him to South Korea, a country he has not been in since he was 8 years old. So I want to address it at the top of the hour. But back to here in this state and accepting responsibility and fixing problems, Minnesota is a great place to live. We rank at the very top of most states in quality of life. Affordability, we were recently named the 8th safest state in terms of crime. We were rated 2nd most retirement-friendly state, which is simply amazing since Florida was 1, and we are still 2nd on a day like today. And job opportunities. We understand the strength and prosperity of this state depends on the ability of every single Minnesotan to thrive. We are a state that chooses not to let people go hungry or homeless or uneducated. However, that generosity has been taken advantage of by an organized group of fraudsters and criminals. Minnesota's longstanding high standards of integrity of public funds go hand in hand with a culture of generosity. You can't have one without the other. Any amount of fraud is too much. That's why over the last several years, we've made many systematic changes to state government to both detect fraud and hold those accountable after it happened. Year after year, we brought new ideas to the legislature to stay ahead of the evolving tactics, and they are evolving. AI poses immense challenges in the fraud space. We've sought top-to-bottom change in state government to create stronger oversight. We leveraged outside experts, we modernized technology, and hold criminals accountable. And we're building on that work today. I'm announcing today that Tim O'Malley will be the Director of Program Integrity. Tim can tell you a little bit about himself, but I think many of you in this room are familiar with him. He was the superintendent of BCA under Governor Paulini. He served the Archdiocese, the Catholic Archdiocese, on making sure that the integrity in their programs was maintained. And more recently, I asked him to fill in as the chief judge on the administrative hearing courts, which he did admirably. And I will note made a culture change there that was the responses from the folks who work over there is simply amazing. Tim, the former judge, former superintendent, as I said, will work across state government to strengthen fraud protection and protect taxpayer dollars. And I want to be clear, he's coming in here, as all these experts will say, and I do it with all my agencies, they are given the full autonomy to speak up when there are issues, to bring solutions forward, and to be with the understanding, and Tim made this clear yesterday as we were talking, he does not work for me. He works for the people of Minnesota, as all of us do. And in fact, he was so clear about that is he wanted to make sure that he rewrote the press release that went out to make sure that it reflects not a reality that we may craft, but the one that's truly there. So I'm truly looking forward to that. We're partnering with third-party experts from Waypoint. You're going to hear Josiah Lamb talk about that, to audit all programs and provide that private sector expertise, something we started doing when we had the problems with the MNLAR system and the licensing. We quit doing it internally and we went outside and it worked. We've installed new leadership inside DHS, and we'll work and continue to work with our federal partners every step of the way to make sure we have accountability. Shireen Gandhi has been over at DHS since January when we made changes over there, and she has brought, and you're going to hear some of it, accountability to the programs, but also doing something that's very challenging in any large organization, culture change amongst that. And I know some make the analysis that it's like turning a battleship. It's about knowing that our good state employees, that the default position is to serve their fellow Minnesotans. And I think what we're going to see is that we need to make sure we're taking those steps that while we're a generous state, we have to be skeptical. And we do that in a way that we still make sure that we're getting speed to the program. And Superintendent Evans has a great analogy to maybe talk a little bit about this. But speed with the integrity of the program have to go hand in hand. And if it means slowing speed down a little bit to get the integrity, then that's exactly what has to happen. It's a problem we take seriously. It should not be a partisan issue. It should not be an excuse to defund popular programs. My biggest heartache in this and regret is I know all along I believe deeply in what state government can do. I have a long history both personally and in my public life around fiscal responsibilities, why Minnesota still across the board ranks as one of the most fiscally sound states, and the rating agencies continue to say so, of just making sure that we're stopping this. And the idea that you just complain and say as it happens or to blame doesn't work. Every governor has dealt with this. That's what my goal is that I'm the last one to deal with it on this level. So the bottom line is we have, just like in COVID, just like in every other situation, I take full responsibility for it. I think, and I will acknowledge certainly to Minnesotans and to the press here, I don't think we've done a good enough job of communicating the hard work that's been done, and that undermines state employees on the side of both. No state employees are involved in any of this. The work that's been done and the amount of money that has been saved and captured doesn't get told, because I think we need to be, I'm going to get more of a cadence around like COVID so that you all know. You don't have to guess. You can see what's happening. And that work has been being done by them. So if you try and commit fraud in Minnesota, and there's folks out there listening right now, you are going to prison eventually. I think the biggest thing on this is you'll hear from some of the experts here, many of these programs, especially federal Medicaid and Medicare, plagues every state. And when you sit down and dig into this, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks, and actually it takes years to become experts in this. These are programs that have been layered up in a spider web over the years that makes it incredibly difficult. And I think unwinding those or bringing about the integrity, it's the reason why we're seeing federal agencies under the Trump administration acknowledge the work that's being done, acknowledge that these things are better, and actually suggesting in other states when I talk to them about implementing that, because they're going to deal with it. COVID moved a lot of money very, very quickly. And our goal was to make sure we were moving that money so that people ate, that they were housed, that they had vaccines, but it also opened up the door to relax the guardrails and to have fraud be committed. So we're committed to getting this. It's why I'm incredibly proud to announce, and I'm going to turn it over to someone, again, has done his time for this state, has done it time and time again, and when it comes time to fix something or to bring someone in that has the credibility to be able to talk to folks, Tim O'Malley has said yes. So I want to introduce our new Director of Program Integrity, Tim O'Malley.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning. There's a lot to cover today, so I'll be brief, but I do want to offer two thoughts. One is an observation and one is a point of clarity. The observation is the obvious one. No one has any tolerance for fraud. It's a widespread problem in Minnesota and across our country. It erodes trust and must be addressed head-on. Minnesotans deserve to know that their tax dollars are being put to good use, and they deserve to know that they can trust our public institutions. We have work cut out for us to rebuild that trust. The point of clarification, while I'm honored that Governor Walz has asked me to assist in combating fraud here, know that I'm not here to serve him. I'm not here to serve any individual, and I'm not here to serve a political party. I'm here to serve Minnesotans. Years ago, I served Minnesotans through an appointment by Governor Tim Pawlenty, and I now welcome the opportunity to do so under Governor Walz. Lastly, I'm convinced that this team in front of you and the governor are serious. He has assured me privately that all of us have the freedom and autonomy to act, to do whatever is necessary to solve this. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm excited to get started. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am Drew Evans, Superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I'm here to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing this morning at the BCA as we work together to combat fraud. The BCA has now formed the BCA Financial Crimes and Fraud section, consolidating all criminal investigative resources into one central location at the BCA to combat a number of different crimes. We have dozens of agents and analysts assigned to investigate wage theft, insurance fraud, traditional financial crimes, and state program fraud. They are a highly experienced and highly trained team. They have built strong relationships with local, state, and federal investigators and prosecutors. They partner with these entities to share information and assist with the response and investigation of these fraud incidents that you've been tracking now for several years. I remain grateful for these relationships and the work of our federal partners at the FBI and many other law enforcement agencies, including the United States Attorney's Office, who bring specialized resources, expertise, and commitment to prosecuting these large, long-term, and often complex investigations. Their ongoing partnership with us is critical to combating these thefts of state and federal funds. The BCA continues to partner with them on all types of crimes at the United States Attorney's Office and federal partners, and remains ready to assist them with our investigations in any way of value to their work as they work to continue to prosecute these fraudsters in the state of Minnesota. We also provide guidance and recommendations to agencies on how to strengthen internal controls, improve application processes, and reduce vulnerabilities in our programs. We have established, it's been up and operating for nearly a year now, a reporting forum on our website where anyone can submit information about suspected state program fraud, including whistleblowers. So far in 2025, we've received nearly 200 tips and referrals from the public, state agencies, and employees about suspected fraud in Minnesota. Every tip we receive is evaluated to determine whether criminal activity can be substantiated and a criminal investigation should be launched based on the information we've received. If an alleged crime is outside the scope of their work, we refer it to the appropriate entity. An example of that is some of what we're here talking about today. Medicaid fraud is investigated by the office, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit in the Minnesota Attorney General's office. So any suspicion of Medicaid fraud is referred through that process, through DHS and to the Attorney General, and then often federal authorities depending on the scope of the work and some of the work that you've been tracking in some of the programs. We also have referred over 30 cases of this type, such as I just mentioned, to that type of entity this year. These referrals that we receive are also as part of working to better share information across a large enterprise in state government with MMB, the Office of Grants Management, and the Department of Revenue. We also have instituted regular meetings with the Office of the Legislative Auditor and our team as we receive these referrals to both deconflict and work collaboratively with each other to ensure both entities are tracking any misuse of state funds. Our Financial Crimes and Fraud section is also ready to respond to what the future holds for these types of crimes. As I've engaged in this work and forming this unit, we are learning and we continue to learn about just the vast array of financial frauds and schemes that continue to evolve regularly across the entire country. They grow in their complexity in all types of frauds, and as noted, AI, synthetic identities, and others are making the landscape of fraud incredibly difficult to continue to look at across everything from private sector to public programs. And as these new tactics emerge, the work that's being done here will need to continue to evolve to prevent that type of activity from becoming. Currently, this section works on investigations and has active investigations involving large-scale benefit fraud, cyber-enabled financial crimes, insurance fraud, identity-based fraud schemes, wage theft, and traditional financial crimes. While criminal enforcement is only part of the work required to change the current landscape and the culture that's been referenced here today in state program fraud, it is vitally important that we hold those that commit crimes and violate the trust of Minnesotans to be held criminally accountable for their actions. In addition to my role as superintendent overseeing our programs, I now chair the Office of Inspector General Coordinating Council that was established under Executive Order 2510 earlier this year, and that council is made up of representatives from the largest 14 state agencies, whether in size or budgets in terms of money that would be provided to various programs. While the BCA is focused on criminal investigations, the OIG Coordinating Council is focused on better understanding the gaps in fraud protections and identifying ways to address those gaps and strengthen barriers to prevent this type of activity from occurring to begin with. When you have a state program or any financial program for that matter, including in the private sector, that is providing money, there are always going to be bad actors who are going to try to fraudulently take advantage of these systems. This is true no matter what state you're in or where you are in our country. That's important to have solid systems in place to identify fraudulent activity as soon as possible, but also take strong prevention, mitigation, and investigative strategies to deter and prevent fraud from occurring to begin with. The Council has entered into a contract with Waypoint Investigations to assist us with this work. This is a company that specializes in forensic accounting, financial investigations, due diligence, business risk mitigation, healthcare compliance and investigations, and tax litigation support. They're working now to help us in the Council develop a toolkit of best practices, policies, and procedures for state agencies to follow to help prevent and identify fraud very early on or prevent it from occurring to begin with. This work is going to take time. It is a heavy lift and is a learning curve for everyone involved. It's also a process that cannot end. This is just the beginning. Bad actors are constantly looking for ways to scam systems, and so states' effort to develop these strong barriers to prevent fraud will need to be ongoing along the way. And we are confident that the work, as was noted here today, coming together, that the right people are in the room working across state agencies to really improve this and prevent fraud from occurring in our state early and often, and when it does, that we hold people accountable for those actions. And so with that, I will turn the mic over to Josiah Lamb, who is the owner of Waypoint Investigations.
Thanks. Hi there. I'm Josiah Lamb. I'm the owner of Waypoint. I'm a forensic accountant and an attorney. I've been involved in fraud-related matters for more than 20 years, including assisting organizations in developing internal controls to help combat fraud. Our team of experts have similar backgrounds with decades of experience while working with federal law enforcement, public accounting, and law firms. In our current capacity, we are working with the BCA to build out this anti-fraud toolkit, which will include policies and procedures specifically designed to address fraud risks that can be utilized enterprise-wide to help prevent fraud in the future. This will serve as a baseline of anti-fraud policies and procedures for every agency to use. Part of this process includes meeting with individuals at each agency who have been tasked with addressing fraud to open the dialogue with the teams to better understand what's happening on the ground so we can implement a more robust anti-fraud set of policies and procedures. After the toolkit is done and completed, the agencies will implement it, and we will come back and review it and determine whether there are some tweaks to be done or whether everything has been implemented successfully. Again, as Drew said, we are in the early stages of the process, and we look forward to continuing working with the BCA to create this anti-fraud toolkit.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Shireen Gandhi, and I serve as the temporary commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Like the governor, DHS takes a zero-tolerance approach to fraud. We are intently focused on solutions, strengthening program integrity, tightening oversight of services, and hardening our programs against attacks by criminals seeking to steal money from the people, the vulnerable people of Minnesota who need the services. We are committed to providing the data and information necessary to our law enforcement partners so they can prosecute criminals stealing from taxpayers. DHS's Inspector General Clark wasn't able to be here today, but he has told me that fraud schemes are evolving and DHS needs to do more to get ahead of the criminals and to keep ahead of the criminals. And as we do more to get ahead of the criminals, there are going to be more credible allegations of fraud established by our Inspector General's office. And as the administrative agency, DHS takes action quickly to stop payments when credible allegations of fraud are established, and then we refer those cases to law enforcement. Law enforcement is responsible for prosecuting the criminals. If you get caught stealing from Minnesota's most vulnerable people, I hope you go to prison. It is also critical that we continue to take more aggressive steps to prevent fraud. Governor Walz put forward a strong package of anti-fraud measures during session that passed with bipartisan support in 2025. A few examples from our agency are licensing autism services, reforms to billing for substance use disorder, treatment, and expanded authority to share data across state agencies so we can stop the bad actors faster. And the Governor's Executive Order 2510 empowered state agencies to accelerate and expand our fraud prevention work. We are moving even more quickly and aggressively to get ahead and keep ahead of the criminals. In carrying out Executive Order 2510 over the last 3 months, a few of the things DHS have done we have disenrolled about 800 inactive providers in our home and community-based services program that hadn't billed in over a year. This action reduces the administrative challenges of overseeing providers who are not providing services to Minnesotans. We increased the risk level of 9 additional Medicaid benefits, so now we have 14 services that we consider high risk. That action gives us more tools to tighten oversight, including pre-enrollment site visits, unannounced site visits, criminal background checks, and fingerprinting for those with ownership interests. We also signed a contract with a third-party vendor to audit billing information and data in these 14 high-risk programs. Using this new technology allows us to move upstream by applying advanced analytics to identify risks before we make payments. And that helps us to move away from the pay and chase approach. Most recently, we also announced a 2-year pause on licenses for new home and community-based service providers. The growth in licensed providers has far outpaced the growth in participants. A pause with an exception process to ensure Minnesotans can access services as needed will allow us to provide necessary monitoring and oversight of the providers. I think, as Governor Walz said, our state is right to be proud of the support we provide to children, to people with disabilities, to older Minnesotans, so they can live healthy lives in our communities. But people's lives should not be a political football. It takes all of us working together, legislators from both sides of the aisle, providers, community members, agencies, to build programs with the right controls to ensure we serve people well. I look forward to working with Tim O'Malley and the experts at Waypoint to strengthen fraud prevention and implement statewide fraud prevention program. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we'll take questions after. I would just note, and as the Commissioner said and others, thank you to this team. I am very cognizant and hearing from those incredible providers who are out there. It's not by chance that we see the largest reduction in fentanyl and opioid deaths that we've seen in decades. It's not by chance that those ratings for quality of life and outcomes are high. And I hear them as they say it will make it more difficult for us to deliver these services while we go through this. And I hear you, but again, I would assure them the program integrity is absolutely critical, because there are those that aren't offering solutions other than cutting the programs. There are those like the president who turned this into a racial issue rather than a crime issue. And I think many of you have witnessed this. We've seen it across private sector, we've seen it across nonprofits, and we've seen it in government. This is the ever-evolving piece, and it is one that I said those tools we use, the simple ability to be able to stop payment when you suspect it, that hadn't existed for any other governor. That was good work by the legislature, and I think the commissioner would acknowledge that. We're glad to take some questions.
Can you say your name and outlet you're with when you
Yeah.
your name and outlet?
Sure, Eric Schilling from Channel 5. Governor, for the Minnesotans watching and see these new changes coming up, they might be saying to themselves, why wasn't this done sooner? What do you say to that?
Much of it was done sooner. You have the outline. It started back in 2020 when some of the first things were happening, and it continues on. I think, again, like everything, after the fact, why didn't we do things this way? Certainly. If we knew now what we knew then. Again, thinking about this, I think some of you are probably asking the questions. There was no toolkit before. There was no toolkit. There was no toolkit amongst any administration. And I think watching what COVID did, we'll certainly get there. I'll take responsibility for it. But I think what the president did and what those are trying to say is that the hard work that's already being done, the amount that has been stopped, that's simply not true. And I think what the president did was elevate it. I do believe, and I will fully own this, we should have been keeping Minnesotans more up to speed on what was happening. We should have been, I think, on a better cadence as you see things that were happening in 2022, as the tools that were given to the administration would get there. So again, after the fact, there was a lot of folks talk about this. I have 7 years of proving this. I just fixed these things. And should we have fixed MNLARS before it got there? Certainly. Certainly we shouldn't have gone through 10 years of trying to get a licensing system. But once we got there, once we figured it out, we fixed it. And I think that's true.
We should have done more sooner.
Do I wish? Of course we always wish we would have done more sooner, but I don't think having an insight into that or seeing that. Remember, these programs were crafted, many of them during COVID. The guardrails were taken off, and the guidance was to move the money with the idea that those guardrails are off and it would be there. In retrospect, again, but I'm not going to say this, I will not apologize for making Minnesota one of the safest states during COVID, and we used many of these programs to do that. The criminals abused this. I think the focus, again, and one thing I'm incredibly proud of, there's not state employees involved in this. Were there state employees that should have done more? Yes, and they're no longer working in the state. But it wasn't out of malice and it wasn't out of criminal. It was the lack of skepticism around these programs. So retrospectively, you always want to do more, but complaining about it doesn't get there. We've been steadily doing this, and I am convinced very shortly, and especially with this team, I don't think there'll be a state that can have the same safeguards in place. And many of them are starting to move as they follow this, because the one thing, and I think when you look at it, the biggest programs that got defrauded were the workman's comp program, and I think 2 states were highlighted for being the best in this, Iowa and Minnesota. That's a big concern for me. And again, I think what you're going to see is going forward in what we know, the incredible work around paid family and medical leave, and these experts who will go in there and dig into that. Lessons learned from this have been applied to that. That program was structured on the front end with fraud prevention in place, where many of these decades-long programs, that was never the case. So.
Can you elaborate on folks who are no longer working in state government that should have been more skeptical of fraud?
Well, you've got a new commissioner at DHS. You have a new commissioner at the Department of Education. You've got some folks who are working over there. Look, these were folks that I think doing the best they can, trying to do what they can. There is no evidence or even no inkling that any of these people did anything illegal, but we needed a culture change. We needed some folks who need to speak. And look, I think there's, and it's, I will stand for this. The person responsible is me. I'm the one responsible, and I hire these folks, they do the work. I'm not going to drag somebody in front of the press and embarrass them on this because, look, the Commissioner of Department of Human Services is the one responsible for us seeing the notes and seeing the work that was done on children's mental health has improved dramatically under this work that we've done. That's what they're working on most of the time. So we've got new commissioners, we've got new leadership over there. We've built out the team. We brought in the folks from BCA, the investigators. And I think what you're seeing now, you're going to see it in the news because those are people being caught because of the system. Keep in mind, it's going on in everywhere, private sector or whatever. If you're not hearing about it, it just means people aren't getting caught. It doesn't mean it's not happening. So.
Mary working with the former service governor, do you have any information on how the state is paying for both this new position and the contract, and then how much it's going to cost?
Drew?
Yeah, so I can't speak for the new position, but what I can tell you is, as the governor has noted, this is an all-of-government approach. So all of the state agencies are going to bear the cost for the work that we're doing here, because that amount of money that will be spent on these contracts and the work that's being done needs to be implemented across the enterprise. So all state agencies, we have processes in place that we share costs when it's something that benefits the enterprise as a whole, so the cost for these will be spread across all state agencies. The contract with Waypoint is up to $200,000, but we bill on a basis, so we'll see where that is, and we'll continue to evaluate. At the end of the day, with any of these contracts that we look at, we're going to pay until the work is done. That's what we're doing at this time, is that contract will be there, but we're going to continue to enter in those until we feel very confident that we have the right processes, procedures, and mitigation efforts in place.
This is a really good question. I'd follow up. It's a really good question because all this work in state government always costs money on the front end, and our budgets are set by the legislature as we ask for it. When we cannot deficit spend, nor will we. They come out of existing budgets, and one of the things you're going to hear from the commissioners is that, and as Drew pointed out, you have to add some of these full-time positions to that. It is going to come out of the budgets and costs, but that's true of every single organization. And I think probably if there's a critique on this is spending more on the front end on this saves you in the long run. And I think trying to cut agency budgets or trying to do it on the cheap ends up in the long run costing you more. So we can get you data. We'll get the data on Tim and from the agency, from MMB. Yeah.
Do you have any sense of why there wasn't stronger oversight earlier? Was this a staffing issue, a funding issue?
I think it's how the programs are structured. Again, the programs say this is what you'll do. Here's how you get the money out. Looking at them, these people are filling it out. Now, the Feeding Our Future is kind of a unique case because of the chaos around COVID and the amount of money that was there. But we look through these, and again, I would remind all of you, we clearly had one in there in 2021, and I said, don't pay them. And they said, you can't do that. You don't have that authority. I said, do not pay them. Let them sue me. They did. And they won. And we paid them. And then they got caught and went to jail after the fact. So a lot of it is that the programs that are set up, and the Medicaid experts who are here, very challenging because, again, and I would assume we're going to see this, there will probably be holds put on legitimate folks for reasons that look like that, and they may bring us to court. Now I have the legal authority at least to stop payment. So I think a lot of it is that they're following the rules. They're trying to get there. It's this change again. We're going to have to be more skeptical about it. You see it, and Drew, I don't want to speak to what the number was. The bulk of all of this in terms of the money is coming out basically out of the Medicaid program. Is that correct?
What I can say, I can't get into the details, but it's a little bit to your question about the tips because there's active investigations. We don't want to jeopardize anything. I did a review of the referrals and tips that came in. What I would tell you that is not news to anybody here, and it was alluded to by the commissioner, that you will see additional prosecutions related to some of these Medicaid programs as they are doing their diligent work going through all this, that the bulk of what I would consider the most egregious and legitimate tips and referrals coming through that portal were absolutely related to this Medicaid program, which is not news to this team. That's something they knew and they've been identifying. And all the others are there things we knew were related to other cases we're working or are under active investigation or anybody can report. So sometimes there's information that we just can't, go on this. And, when we work through this work day in, day out, in terms of, controls in place, that's why we're engaging with experts. As you learn these things in programs that existed for dozens of years, And then you see, this is true in the private sector and the fraud work that we do. When criminals find a thread that they can exploit, they're going to exploit it. And we can always look back and say that those controls should have been more strengthened more on the front end of a program, but once they're there, what's incumbent upon this team and from my perspective and the council is that we need to not only strengthen those controls and put those in place for existing programs, but also start looking prospectively with this work. That's why we're developing these toolkits, so that fraud, skepticism is always where our folks are starting, to make sure you're looking for those elements to begin with as we're implementing programs and as we're processing applications. One of the things we've talked about that's related to this when we look at it from really three phases broadly, and this is slightly different across all different agencies. You look at it from an application perspective in fraud controls, a determination and a disbursement, meaning when people are coming in and making an application in the system, how do we ensure that these are proper identities, individuals that are applying, determination that we're doing the right due diligence when an agency is approving an individual or an entity for engaging in the program, and then strong disbursement of controls so that we ensure that the money is going where it should be, that we're tracking it from there. That's the hard work that's being done, trying to create consistency across all agencies, knowing all these programs are very different, but what is the layer that we can put in place working together with this toolkit so that we create consistency in all programs, getting to your point, to ensure those controls are in place on the front end.
Does Minnesota need to increase penalties? Currently,
Sure.
you steal millions of dollars in Medicaid, and it's the same sentence as walking in the Target or stealing TV.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I don't want to jeopardize anything on this and say, I come back to this. The sense of just being furious around this, one, it undermines faith in government at a time, to be quite honest with you, that I think is one of the scariest in our nation's history around government and the faith in it. Yes, and we did do a little bit. I think they get viewed as victimless crimes or something. They are not victimless crimes, because that's going to mean there's less money in substance use disorder, that Jeremy Drucker and his team saved lives, made a difference in some really innovative programs, and they don't have as much money. So I do think that. I'll go back to the legislature again. I think that would be something that Republicans would definitely agree with us on. But I do tell all of you, you heard a little bit of this as Drew said, that building these cases, many of these go back decades. Keep in mind, there's people who have been getting away with this for a long time. There was nothing there, especially in Medicaid fraud. I really worry on the AI piece of it, because it's going to make it. I asked last legislative session for the tools for our team to have the AI, because just something as simple, they're processing 1.5 million.
We have 1.2 million people on the program, millions and millions of claims.
And how many people working on that?
Total at DHS is 2,000.
Yeah, but how many are working on that piece, on verification around Medicaid?
Several hundred.
Okay, so the point being on this is people are saying, well, couldn't you look and couldn't you see this? In some cases, it dropped me. I'm like, why didn't somebody just drive out there and look at it? That's a question I asked them. Drive out there. And I said, why don't you drive out and verify every one of these? That's when they said 1.3 million of them with 40 people. That will take us 75 years if we do 10 a day or whatever it be. So tools to use this, AI tools that look and say, this is just something's wrong here, because these people are getting super sophisticated. They send in an application with proper, they're stealing Social Security numbers or whatever it might be. They're filling them out. They meet the federal requirements. In many of these cases, they met the federal requirements, and the state is the pass-through. And how do you get those tools, and how do you make the case? So I'm going to go back to your question on this. This takes a ton of work. It undermines state government. It is not a victimless crime, and these people should be prosecuted to the extent that it is. The thing that gets people, and here's how I view it, AJ. Yeah, I understand. We have crimes that are misdemeanors to felonies and all that. In this space, it seems like the thing that captures people's attention is when it's a big, big number or whatever. A whole bunch of small numbers has the same effect. It undermines us. And so, yes, I would like to see us be, I'm just going to say it. I watch very carefully. And I don't like to think I'm vindictive or anything, but when I see these lengthy sentences being given to these people, I feel good about that. They need to be there. Yeah, back.
Governor Joey Kaplan from WCCO. The 14 high-risk programs that you're auditing, did fraud happen in every one of those programs?
So the 14 high-risk programs were designated high-risk for a number of reasons. So
Are they designated because fraud could happen, or you've identified fraud
both.
that happened?
Both. They were, well, some of them are new and just getting up and running, so not much opportunity yet, but we're concerned about it because of the controls. And so I think it's very important that we work with the legislature on the front end to design these programs and to have the internal controls throughout. We're owning at DHS more controls than we already have. And then one of the reasons that these got designated high risk is because we started using data analytics within DHS, looking at trends and outliers, and we saw concerning patterns in that data. Now, we haven't finished investigating all of those claims that we flagged, but they are with the Inspector General's office and they are looking at them.
Do you have an estimate of how much money could have been stolen from those programs?
So,
is it, tens of millions, hundreds of millions?
It is really hard to estimate the amount of fraud. What I know from our Inspector General is the facts and evidence show us, we have the amount of fraud that's been prosecuted. I will tell you that we have over 1,300 open cases right now with our Inspector General. And over the past 5 years, we've identified $50 million for recovery for the Medicaid program.
Governor, I also wanted to ask you about, certainly you talked about the worry about holding the community collectively responsible for the actions that the city does. I want to ask you, though, because one thing that I've spoken with some members of that community is they say, it might be time for a reckoning. Do you want to hear more from members and leaders from the Somali community to say, we need to look at ourselves, we need to hold our own neighbors accountable, because look at the damage that this has done to our community. What do you want to hear more from, instead of just saying, don't blame us? Do you want to see more ownership and oversight from within the Somali?
Look, it's not law-abiding citizens. If that were the case, there's a lot of white men should be holding a lot of white men accountable for the crimes that they have committed. I think for the community to maybe educate their population, because I think what you're seeing here is there's secondary victims in this, that there's providers inside the community that are then victimizing the community themselves by signing them up, because when we're going to some of these people, they're like, I had no idea I was in this program. So I think it's asking us then, for every crime, which of course the majority being committed by white men, asking us to do more about that. I think it's crime in general. And I think the biggest thing on this is just making sure that we're educating the population. And again, this is 80 people or so that have been convicted in this, maybe some more in that, out of a broader ring. Medicaid fraud will stretch across all racial demographics, all ethnic groups. So I think it's really important for us to note each community's got this in their own midst, but to blame them and say that they should have been responsible for stopping it, I think that's a pretty hard reach. I think we continue to educate folks about why they shouldn't commit crimes. You would hope that it's being taught both at home and at schools and in our society. But no, I think this idea that the Somali community's to blame for this because they didn't do more, I think that's how we got into this. And that's, again, I know we're not going to lose the whole plot here. All this work that's being done, Donald Trump brought this to the attention like this is something brand new. This is not brand new, and it's been being worked on, but he made it white hot and very dangerous. Yeah.
You're arriving at Channel 5. Was there a specific moment, a specific date, when you realized we have a fraud problem in Minnesota?
Well, I think it's always there. I don't think a specific date, but I think I was always concerned with COVID, because if you're in on these decisions that we're making, the amount of funds that we're moving across the country and the fraud allegations that were coming up across the country, I think the one that really, when I started to see some of this, was very early on. I knew there was going to be a problem. I personally apparently applied for unemployment benefits in 3 different states under my Social Security number, my name. I got the notices from Illinois, I think Missouri, and one other, and I said, my God, how much would this be happening? And that's when I went, the first one, and this was early in COVID, went to DEED and asked about it. My first concern was in the unemployment insurance. And that is pretty solid, pretty clear, but we were talking about it then that we have to be very, very careful. But again, I think in retrospect on this, my fear, and I think the world's fear, was food shortages, lack of access to health care, lack of access to basic services during COVID, and it outweighed that. But
what does COVID have to do with like autism providers?
it has everything to do with it that the money was moving quickly at that time, and a lot of these programs brought down the guardrails on all those programs to make sure they got out because they weren't able to deliver services the same way, in-home services and things like that. And that's when you first start seeing it. And it's pretty complex how the payment goes. And a lot of these folks are fairly sophisticated. I think this oversimplification, like, you know, you should have caught them and know they weren't doing it. Once we have the tools now to see the outliers, to see the things that are falling outside of that, we got a better picture. In retrospect, do I wish we had all these tools when COVID started? Yes, I certainly do.
How did we go from earlier this year, the former commissioner of DHS sitting here at the Capitol and telling Minnesota there's more rumors of fraud than there is actual fraud, to what we're hearing today?
I certainly never said that. I never at once said that. I said I do not know. My gut feeling is, just like anywhere, this is a problem across the country. We were seeing folks, maybe not just outright fraud, running into buildings, crashing, you know, the display cases and running out with stuff. That crime had increased, all of those things. So I was focusing on across this, crimes on carjackings, which some of you remember a few years ago was top priority. We went from 87 to 12. Massive decreases on that. So focusing across crime in this, I fully suspect, and I fully suspect right now, they will continue to work around this. These are people that you would have thought, once they saw all these people going to prison, they would have cut their losses and taken off. Not the case. Not the case. They'll continue to do it. So
Was the messaging from the state, though? The commissioner of DHS sat here and told the Senate.
that commissioner is not here. That commissioner is no longer working for the state of Minnesota, and I never said such a thing. So I think you understand the accountability pieces that go with this, because I am under no illusion that these things weren't happening. I'm under no illusion it's not happening everywhere. My God, we saw it at the Chamber of Commerce. We see it that the folks are out there. And I think now, getting at the heart of it, and what my charge to them and this team here and across state government is, we now know where the situation is. We have a better picture into it. We are going to continue to be a generous state that helps folks, but we're going to do so with a skepticism that they haven't seen. And when I say haven't seen ever through any administration that you're going to see now.
Governor, could you please talk a little bit, Matt,
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about this new program, Integrity? This is under the Bureau of
Yeah, maybe I'll let Tim talk a little bit about.
the outcomes that you're looking for this. Is Tim O'Malley going to produce a report in 90 days?
Yeah.
What can we see
Yep.
from this?
Good question.
Yeah, I'll be very direct with you. I have a job now that I need to finish at the court, so I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of people over the last few weeks. I have a lot to learn, but I do know I've worked with Waypoint in the past over here. Certainly I'm very familiar with the BCA from my time there, and Drew and I have stayed in touch. I've been working with the governor's office for the past year on a number of other issues. I believe we're well positioned to address this. I can't give you the specifics right now, honestly.
Will you hire staff?
Pardon me?
Will you have staff that will be working on these?
Oh, it wouldn't be big, no. I think there's resources here, especially between, and I had a chance to talk to Josiah. I'm familiar with the people they have there. Many of them have great experience in working, usually in the federal system, on these types of things, and they're in-house there now. But that's something that we're going to talk about. Is there more that has to be done there? I could envision there's 2 or 3 people that I might ask to come along to help with this. A couple of them I think might even volunteer. They're retired now and they're interested in still service. But there's not going to be a big cost to this. I don't see that, if that's what you're asking.
Can you clarify the difference between Optum and Waypoint? You now have 2 third-party companies. Are there more coming in the pipeline?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
He can talk about Waypoint, but Optum is what contract that DHS put in place as part of the executive order. So we were doing data analytics. We were looking at trends and outliers. The governor wanted DHS to do more, go faster, to hold people accountable. And so we did an emergency contract with Optum. They were the only entity that was able to start right away, that did not have an 8 to 10 month ramp up time. And so that contract is to look at the claims in the 14 high risk services at DHS and to perform an analysis on them before we pay those claims so that we can potentially catch more fraud on the front end. We'll also find mistakes, but we're looking to catch fraud on the front end before we pay a claim.
Drew can add to that.
And I can add to the second piece, and it goes a little bit back to your question too. So when you ask, about staff and all that, when that office, Tim and his expertise and work, one of the things when it comes to the council that we're doing is bringing these agencies together. What the goal here in the oversight, and we are working regularly, developing recommendations and looking for a consistent framework that will be applied across all state agencies. The expectation in that particular realm is not a director of oversight to do that. It's to ensure that those state agencies embed that in the culture and the fabric of every organization across the state. The state of Minnesota would be a large corporation if we were comparing it to one of our Fortune 500 companies in Minnesota. And so fraud prevention and the work and the culture change that we're working on is not just having one office that's coming in and telling people what to do every day. It's improving a culture so that every state employee that's handling money and working with programs has that at the forefront, that we want to get the money to people that are in need, that are benefiting from these programs, but we also look to see are there fraudsters and criminals that are looking at that each and every day. That's part of what, when you're asking the differentiation between the two, Optum is working directly with DHS and their particular program and what they're looking in those Medicaid and some of the work that they've talked about. Waypoint is working with us across the enterprise and will be working with Tim and the work that he's going to do to ensure that we are building in as we learn from what they're currently doing. Some programs we're very impressed with in state government. Even new programs that are coming online, they've taken very good steps as our team has worked with them. It's one of the things that we do at the BCA now as they build a new program. We're more than willing to sit down with our fraud investigators who see what happens when things go very bad, as to make sure they're building in their programs. Deed's done that recently, and you've seen some of that work, and they built in a strong prevention program. That's what Waypoint's going to help us do as he talks to all the agencies. Look who's doing it well. We replicate it. Look who still needs additional work to be done in those, and then that will be a consistent approach. Here's the thing. Minnesotans should expect across all of our state programs, when they're working on these programs every day, that every state agency is taking a consistent approach to fraud prevention, mitigation, identification, investigation, and accountability. And we can do that across the enterprise while recognizing some of these programs more complex with a lot of federal, integration and all types of different things will have to have their own nuances in the process. But we think a baseline absolutely can be done and achieved across the enterprise so that when people ask, were these things done when something goes wrong, we can look back and say, yes, they were, or no, they weren't, and hold the right people accountable if they weren't.
And I'm just for all of you, I think it's for Minnesotans and for you, the press, is that Tim, and I think it's important to continue to say this publicly, the autonomy that he has. If Tim O'Malley in this position and coming on, if he feels like at some point in time, the governor's dragging his feet, I don't think he did enough early on, he didn't do that, he's going to come forward and say that because his job is to fix this and to do that. I don't believe they're taking it seriously, so I don't believe this agency's taking it serious enough. That's both for my people internally across there, that he has the full power to go. He will call his own press conferences if he needs to. He will answer his own questions on this. He's not putting his integrity on the line for this. He's here to fix that, and that's what we've made clear. And I think the piece in this, as it gets so politicized with what the president did, of those who have no experience in this, don't understand it, or saying they would have done better, they have no concept of where that was at. After an event like this happens, should you have done better? Yes. Like we said, are there things you learn from that? Yes. But keep in mind, these state agencies have been running for decades, for centuries, and much of this has never been done, had never been put in before. Now, are there more criminals now than there were at one time? I don't know. How much got missed over time? We may find audits that turn up how far back they go, but I think you're going to expect, it's been going on for a long time. The extent and the size of it is why I keep coming back to this. We never saw that kind of money move. We never saw it move without the safeguards before, and I think that opened it up. And the sophistication. I mean, every one of you are getting fraud calls, and it's a lot more sophisticated than the Nigerian prince who needs you to send your Social Security number to him. It's a lot more sophisticated on defrauding you. Eric?
Governor, is the well too spoiled, or can you count on cooperation office here and the FBI.
100%. That well is not spoiled. I would let Drew talk to that, and I'm going to say that. In the midst of what's very clearly a vindictive attack on Minnesota from this administration, I will say this, the bright point on this has been the U.S. Attorney's Office. And you saw that when Andy Lugar left. We never missed a beat to Joe Thompson, and they have been good partners. I'll let Drew talk about it. He worked with them, and we have talked about this. And look, I have to assess this too. I understand when I speak up, it brings Donald Trump's petty vindictiveness to Minnesota. And this is all about coming and attacking us. He didn't know anything about this. He doesn't know how a Medicaid program works. The only thing he knows about it is he's going to double the cost over the next week. But he doesn't know how these programs work or anything about it. So he heard, and somebody told him, the Somalis are stealing money and they're not doing anything about it. Throw it up there. That's not how the U.S. Attorney's Office works.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to. It's an excellent question. I don't know the new U.S. Attorney, but I look forward to building a relationship with him. What I've heard him speak about already this week is fraud will remain a priority for that office. And it was for U.S. Attorney Lugar when he was in place. We work together with that office daily, whether it's human trafficking, child sexual abuse, whether it's violent crime that you covered. I have no reason to expect that to change. While I don't know him personally, I know his team well. And my people know his team well, and they're dedicated public servants that are going to prosecute people that are wishing to harm Minnesotans. Same goes for the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. As we've been working through a new administration, certainly in Washington, and yet those relations don't change. They're the same people here every day. While their priorities change from time to time, given what they're doing in the federal government, certainly every single day our team has a strong relationship with the FBI. I have a strong relationship with the special agent in charge, who's a dedicated public servant, and I expect that to continue. Not only with fraud, but all the other things that we do in Minnesota.
Who hasn't got one? Has anybody not got one that needs one? All right. Sure. If we got any more on topic, and then we'll go. I'm going to release these guys.
I just wanted to clarify, when you said earlier folks aren't working for DHS anymore,
Yep.
That is directly connected to fraud. Those people are no longer commissioners.
Look, we needed a change in culture, and those people are no longer working. As I said again, those are dedicated public servants who helped usher us through the most difficult time in state history in COVID, had got us the best outcomes of almost any state in the nation. But when it came to this, I think it was important for us to get a change. It was a time to get a change in culture, and that's why those moves were made. And I'm not going to disparage their work. They did a fabulous job on the things they needed to, but it's pretty obvious. Fraud happened. We need to take accountability, ultimately me, and that's why I said I'm not going to drag anybody. We're not going to have, a public lashing at folks. We're not doing it, but we are going to hold people accountable. These agency heads know that they're to be there. That's about changing culture, changing responsibility. And again, not out of malice, not out of crime, but more so just following the rules and getting that money out the door. We have to change that a little bit.
People lost their jobs because of fraud? Is that
New leadership was needed because of this threat. But, for example, Commissioner Gandhi comes to this not because she's just fixing fraud in the culture, which she's doing, is because she manages these programs so well, and that can't get lost in this. The outcomes of the programs, whether it's Medicaid or whether it's substance use disorder, we're getting better results than almost any other state. The problem is we could be doing even more if we have these resources.
Okay, Allison, you were asked on Meet the Press if you take accountability for the fraud that's happened under your administration. Your answer is a little unclear, so I just want
Yes. Yes, I take responsibility for everything. I take responsibility for COVID. I take responsibility for George Floyd. I take responsibility for balancing the budgets. And I do take responsibility for making this state one of the best in the country for children to live, so the outcomes. I also note to folks that the one airport that has remained on time is Minneapolis-St. Paul. I take responsibility for that. I appoint everybody to the MAC Council, and I am fully responsible for it. So I'm not sure Minnesotans know that part. I'll take the off-topic. You guys want to? You guys can go, and I'll do the off-topic. Yes, no. Thanks.
We saw another town hall this past weekend for demonstration parents who were calling for action. I just wanted to check with your office if there's any update on gun violence.
Oh, yes. There's updates. Okay. I'll be rolling out a series of incredibly aggressive executive actions because the stonewalling and the ability to deal with this, I think one of your organizations just put out what I all knew. 78% of the people in the suburbs support an assault weapon ban and a ban on high-capacity magazines. 18% of people, 60% of people strongly support it. across the state. 18% of people do not. Those 18 are apparently the Republican legislators and leaders who are here at the Capitol. Minnesotans are dying, literally, for us to do more around gun violence prevention. So, yes, next week we'll be rolling out a series of that. I'm going to deal with this because we multitask. Just to be very clear, insurance rates are going to double. We have ICE in an unconstitutional attack on us. We have gun violence proposals that could make a difference. We have a dysfunctional federal government. And I understand this. The folks who think they want to represent the state of Minnesota, like Mike Lindell, are going to try and talk about fraud without one idea how to fix it. And the irony of this administration, who just freed a fraudster, one of the biggest fraudsters we've had, people who served and were convicted by a jury of their peers, pardoning them. What I will guarantee you is anybody committing fraud in Minnesota through all of this, they're certainly not getting a state pardon. So yes, you're going to hear a lot more on this, and this one breaks my heart with those families from Annunciation, because this is that day for them. They are still in that moment, and when they saw we had a chance to do things, many things around gun violence, and it hasn't been done, we'll do it. But I want to thank you all, and I will say this. I know you got a lot of things out here. I've asked my team to develop much more of a cadence about these briefings, to put out and push as much information as possible. This is where a free press can really help continue to find this. And I think by not getting that information, we've left open speculation. We've left open where it's being done. Minnesotans need to be assured that these folks and what's happening is there. So I think what you're going to see is a much more consistent cadence, much more. And again, when we can get the data, we'll get it. I have to be very careful, and they remind me of this, of not jeopardizing open cases. But I think for all of you, we can get pretty close to that and let you put it out there. And I think part of this is an education piece. One, yes, to tell Minnesotans we're on it. But I think you want to do this. What are the deterrents? AJ talked about. I'm not certain that longer sentences deter people. If you're going to commit crimes, they do it. I don't think they think, I'm going to steal $1 million, but I might get 14 years instead of 7. I'm not going to do it. But I do think it's something that once you do it, you're not coming back out at least for 14 years to do it. So I think we're going to continue to make the case that you're not going to get away with it. It's not going to happen. We'll get better at this with the toolkits. I, again, want to reiterate to our incredible providers who made this the best state in the country to live in, we are going to continue to prioritize you, and it's in their best interest to help us weed out the bad actors so that we're left with the good ones. So I want to thank you all, and we'll continue to update you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Claire.
Too much time pressing. It just seems like
Oh, it's fabulous. What? I do. Oh, yeah.
Maybe 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
I don't have a gym membership.
not underestimate the machine. Is this still on? Joe, is this off? Are we still live streaming?
I'm like rough, but this is yesterday. You know.
Maybe we just put it in clean.
I mean, I think